Grooming without a mirror? Not possible. Mirrors are a part of our daily routine. They are made of glass coated on one side with silver nitrate and a layer of protective paint. The silver nitrate coating reflects light and thus presents the image of the viewer. Prior to the development of glass mirror making technology in the late 19th century, it was the still surfaces of liquids such as water that served as mirrors for civilizations across hundreds of centuries. Was it not in one such watery mirror that Narcissus, as Greek mythology goes, saw his own reflection, fell in love with it, and pined to death? Water, the gift of nature, is capable of reflecting life as beautiful as it is. Civilizations, however, needed compact and handy reflecting devices. That need was actualized in the Iron Age, with the development of mirrors in ancient Egypt, Rome, Greece, and India. Though extinct elsewhere now, that ancient metal mirror craft is alive, perhaps only in Aranmula, a village in Pathanamthitta district in southern Kerala. Thanks to the ancestors of Arjunan Achari for zealously pursuing and preserving the traditional metal mirror craft in the family for well over 2 centuries now. Arjunan Achari's forefathers were metal craftsmen in Tamil Nadu. In the middle of the 18th century, at the behest of the Pandalam Raja, they migrated to Kerala to execute metal works at the Aranmula Parthasarathi temple. After the temple's consecration, they settled down in Aranmula and took to making fine quality mirrors from metals. Though simple, a fine sense of metallurgy, enormous dedication, and exceptional dexterity are needed to master the craft. This, however, is no deterrent to Arjunan Achari's family from pursuing the craft. Having learnt all the finer aspects of the craft, Selvaraj, the youngest son of Arjuna Achari, is now treading the path of his forefathers. Though not a remunerative vocation, young Selvaraj is committed to keep the traditional craft alive. Metal mirrors, objects of beauty, are the product of traditional metal craft. The craft involves 5 distinct processes: preparation of alloy, preparation of mold crucible assembly, casting of metal discs, polishing of the discs, mounting mirrors on brass frames. Bronze is the alloy used in making metal mirrors. It is about 29% tin and 70% copper, with other elements such as zinc, phosphorus, iron, and nickel in traces. The crucible mold assembly, unique to the metal mirror craft of Aranmula, consists of 2 burnt clay discs. The inner surface of one of the discs is coated with fine clay and is rubbed so as to obtain a smooth surface. It is this surface that holds the front face of the mirror. Therefore, nothing is left to chance in making the surface evenly plane. The level is carefully checked. Excess clay is scraped and the surface is gently rubbed to reach the required evenness. The second disc also undergoes a similar treatment, but not so critically as the first one, for this surface of the disc holds the back face of the metal cast. Both the discs are given a coat of fine charcoal prior to being taken up for assembly. To create space between the discs of the metal cast, tin pieces of the height of the cast are kept on the edge of the disc. A piece of wax between the discs provides a passage for the molten alloy to flow from the crucible into the mold. The edges of the discs are sealed with clay. The sealed mold is coated with a first investment mixture of fresh clay and finely ground burnt clay. This is followed by a second investment mix containing roof tile powder and chopped jute. A similar treatment of clay coating is provided on the other side of the crucible mold assembly to ensure protection to the cast. At the point where the wax is kept, a mouth-like cavity is shaped. A clay crucible that holds the alloy is placed into the cavity and is firmed up. Clay from the base of the crucible is carefully removed, exposing the wax. A hole is made at the base of the crucible. It is through this hole that the gases formed in the crucible during casting are liberated. The dried crucible mold assembly is ready to take the charge of the copper tin alloy. The alloy lumps broken into small pieces are loaded into the crucible. The mouth of the crucible is now sealed. To ensure that the molten alloy doesn't leak, the mouth of the assembly is covered with a thick coat of clay mixed with jute. This is followed by a thin investment layer of superfine clay. The crucible mold assemblies with the charge of the alloy are then sun-dried. The dried crucible mold assemblies are ready for the casting process. The molds are positioned in the charcoal-filled furnace pit with the crucible portion resting on the bed of the pit. The furnace is fired. It is long experience that guides the craftsman in the charging of the furnace to the right degree of temperature to melt the alloy loaded in the crucible. The craftsmen go by the shade of the amber to know when the alloy is done. The assemblies will now be taken out of the furnace for casting. Before casting, the hole in the crucible made for the gases to escape is closed with clay. The molten charge is cast by slowly turning the assembly upwards. This allows the molten alloy to flow down into the circular mold. A few gentle taps ensure that the alloy spreads evenly throughout the mold assuming the shape of a disc. This exacting work done by Aranmula craftsmen seldom fails. While the charge is still red hot, the crucible mouth is broken open and allowed to cool. Despite the utmost care given, the craftsman doesn't know whether the disc is intact until the mold is opened. It indeed is. The disc so obtained is dull and lusterless. It is this piece of alloy that is transformed into a mirror. But before the mirror comes alive out of the slack disc, it has to be sized and shaped. The craftsmen exercise great attention so as not to break the fragile thin disc. It is shaped to give a roughly oval form. Now begins the fourth stage of polishing the disc. For polishing, which is a tedious process often lasting a couple of days, the disc is embedded on the waxed surface of a wooden blank. The metal disc is polished on several abrasive media. First, a round of polishing on a coarse sandpaper. This helps remove the tiny metal floughs off the surface of the disc. Then, polishing on a finer wet paper gives smoothness and a little luster. Now begins a third and final round of polishing. Starting with a medium of jute fiber, the polishing is done on a series of fine-textured cotton cloths. In this phase of polishing, craftsmen have to exercise restraint in applying pressure, for any excess pressure could break the disc, shattering the whole labor. But the deft hands of the Aranmula craftsmen seldom fail, because what powers their hands is a skill that has stood the test of time across generations. They succeed every time in polishing the disc to perfection. It is this perfect, smooth finish they give that makes the copper-tin alloy come alive as mirror, the mirror of life. Now begins the last phase in the creation of the Aranmula metal mirror. These mirrors, a marvel of traditional craftsmanship, should indeed be housed in a frame matching their aesthetic charm and beauty. The brass frames come in a variety of ornate designs. Floral and animal patterns, drawn from the traditional temple arts, lend a majestic aura to the frames. The polished mirror is warmed just enough to separate it from the wooden blank, and is then mounted on to the finished frame. A bed of wax on the frame holds the mirror securely. Mirror tikkas and ornamental stones enrich the aesthetic appeal of the mirror. No wonder then that these metal mirrors are held in high esteem as objects of a rare craft that is alive only in Aranmula. For the Convasius, these objects of matchless perfection are not merely mirrors. They are more than mirrors, a precious embodiment of an ancient heritage.